Today I'm going to contribute from the lchaim publication, Living with the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Rebbe is the teacher, the head of the body of us. And the reason I want to read from here is there's a few really good stuff here. So, first of all, the Rebbe writes this letter. I'm in receipt of your letter written on Purim, and in view of its, Purim is not a Jewish holiday that just passed. In view of its contents, I hasten to reply to it ahead of turn of the special delivery. Following the order in your letter, I'll refer to your problem of finding yourself and your wife in depression from the disappointment of not following through with our dreams of going to Israel. It is surely unnecessary to emphasize to you again that the only reason for my opinion that you ought to continue in the USA is that American Jewry, especially the younger generation, have a priority claim on your services to help permeate them with Yiddishkeit, especially after you've had such immeasurable hatzlacha in this. To be sure, the yishuv, the settlement in Eretz Yisrael, hatzlacha means success, and Yiddishkeit is Judaism, so the land of Israel would also benefit from your presence there, but it would be not of the same scope and quality as here. Furthermore, making Aliyah, moving up to Israel, requires a certain period of time and adjustment, getting the proper feel of a new situation. In the present jet age, every minute is of the essence, especially insofar as youth is concerned. All the above is coupled with the consideration that doing the proper thing is the channel for contentment and inner peace, and God's blessings also in all personal affairs. Pursuant to the above, my advice was further predicated on the assumption that the activities can be carried out with joy and gladness of heart, which is essential if the objectives are to be attained in fullest measure, and certainly not in a state of depression or a feeling of imposition. There's no need to belabor the point to an experienced communal worker like yourself. In light of all that's been said above, if for any reason the disappointment of your unfulfilled dreams of going to Israel created a different situation from what I had envisioned, then of course my advice to stay would be pointless and out of place. To put it simply, if after several months of continuing with your work here, you still find you cannot snap out of the depression, and if the reason behind it is none other than the unfulfilled dream, then of course you have my blessing to go to Israel and do what you can there. Should you ever decide that the cause of the present depression is not, after all, really the above, and hence can be eliminated, restoring you back to your former state of good cheer and confidence to be able to carry out your outreach activities with joy and gladness of heart, then the second problem mentioned here, the question of a house, has to be tackled. Inasmuch as our sages declare that a nice dwelling broadens a person's mind and is conducive to great achievements both in personal and communal affairs, you should look for a suitable house in a suitable section. As for selling all your assets, this is not advisable nor is it necessary. I have at my disposal a fund for such special situations, and a loan would be gladly made available to you for the full amount that you may require to enable you to purchase a nice dwelling as above. You may set your own terms of repayment at your convenience. As I do not wish to be involved in a heter riska, an arrangement that permits interest to be charged on a loan, the loan would have to be interest-free. It would create no hardship for anyone, and you do not need to hesitate about it at all. Since your letter was written on Purim, and the reply is Erev Shabbos Mevrachim Nisan, the eve of the Shabbos on which the month of Nisan is blessed, both of which are occasions for simcha, joy. May there always be true joy in your home, and to quote the Megillas Esther, light, joy, gladness, and honor. In every sense of these terms. With blessing, I believe there's been some mention of a shidduch for your daughter in Eretz Yisrael. If there are further developments, I would be glad to hear about it. Bezalel made the ark. Of all the components of the sanctuary, why is Bezalel's name associated with the ark? At different times in history, all the other vessels were also fashioned by other people, like the first and second holy temples. They'll also be made for the third holy temple when it's reestablished. However, there's always been only one ark made by Bezalel. hidden away after the destruction. In the future, it will be revealed. And I'll read a story now after I read a few of the Torah quotes. So the first quote is, Moses called Bezalel and Oholiab and every wise-hearted man. Why didn't the wise-hearted man come on their own to Moses and wait until he approached each of them individually? Because the person who's truly wise-hearted doesn't consider himself wise. When Moses issued his call, none of them thought he was talking to them. Of the 100 talents of silver were cast the sockets of the sanctuary. The Hebrew root of the word socket, Aden, has two meanings, a base or door still, Lord and Master. Both meanings, however, are interconnected. This is alluded to Rabbi Meir's statement in the Zohar, he who is small is great. He who is great is small. A person who is as humble as a doorsill is truly noble, while one who lords himself over others and feels superior is truly lowly. And the children of Israel did according to all that God commanded Moses, and they brought the tabernacle to Moses. This contains an important lesson in how to build the individual sanctuary that exists in every Jewish home. The first thing is to establish it according to all that God commands, observing mitzvot carefully and scrupulously. The next step is to bring it to Moses, the singular Jewish leader of a given generation, to allow the divine presence to rest in it. And Moses blessed them. What was his blessing? May it be God's will that the divine presence rest on the work of your hands. Every blessing of any type needs a proper vessel on which to rest. A person cannot sit back and wait for God to shower him with blessings. He must take practical action and expend the required effort in forming the vessel. When the stranger entered the little... Now I'm going to read this story. When the stranger entered the little shul, the regulars were curious. Who was he and why had he come to their town? But he was in a great hurry, and so he was relieved to see a quorum of men already assembled, ready to begin the morning prayers. There was no rabbi there, and not wanting to wait, the stranger ascended to the bima. The regulars were surprised and offended that this unknown man presumed to lead the prayers. After all, who was this fellow who didn't even have the courtesy to wait a few minutes for the rabbi or the president of the congregation? The stranger had already begun the morning service when the president arrived. Seeing a stranger at the bima, he rushed up to him and said, "What chutzpah, do you think you're to begin the prayers for the rabbi, or I have arrived?" And he continued berating the man in this fashion. The stranger, however, just kept silent, but his refusal to respond infuriated the president, and he blurted, "Don't you see who you're speaking to?" Finally, the stranger replied in a quiet voice, "You also do not see to whom you are speaking to whom you are speaking." No sooner had these words been uttered that everything went dark before the president's eyes. He rushed to a doctor, then to a specialist, to several specialists, but no one could find a cause for his sudden blindness. He tried every treatment that was suggested to him, but nothing proved a cure. Then it dawned on him, when had his blindness begun, after he had angry words with the stranger in the shul. Undoubtedly, he had offended a hidden tzaddik with his words, and this was the consequence of his anger. In despair, he decided to travel to see the Baal Shem Tov. He had heard about this great tzaddik, maybe he could help. "Rabbi, I heard that you can perform miracles. I've been blind since I angered a certain hidden tzaddik. My problem is I don't know who he is or where I can find him." The Baal Shem Tov replied, "The man is my disciple, Rabbi Yaakov Koppel, and you sinned against him with your angry speech. Go to him and beg his forgiveness. If he forgives you, your blindness will be cured." The man indeed traveled to Rabbi Yaakov, who accepted his apology. His sight returned as quickly as it had vanished. The morning prayers just ended. The Baal Shem Tov, who was an esteemed visitor of the town, was about to wash his hands before partaking of a meal, when a distraught woman approached him. She waited the whole service and could contain herself no longer. "Rabbi, my husband's been missing a long time. I've done everything I can think of to try to find him, but I have no idea where he went. What will happen to me? Please, Rabbi, help me find him." The woman wept. The Baal Shem Tov stood there, his washing cup poised to pour water on his hands in the preparation for the blessing of bread. But instead of continuing, he stopped and responded to the woman, "You'll find your husband in the city of Em." Infused with new hope, the woman departed. The The woman departed infused with new hope, but the rabbi of the city, who had heard a great deal about the Baal Shem Tov, who had been watching the exchange, now he had what seemed to him to be a serious question of Jewish law. "I beg your pardon," began the rabbi. "I was watching an exchange with the woman, and it seemed that you were saying words of prophecy. If it was true, I think you were required to wash your hands before speaking." The Baal Shem Tov responded to the rabbi with a question. "If you saw chickens suddenly fluttering about your table with expensive glassware, what would your reaction be? I think you'd automatically reach out to chase them away." The rabbi acquiesced, but he clearly was not following the Baal Shem Tov's logic. "I did what came naturally to me," said the Baal Shem Tov. "I saw standing before me a woman in utter despair, almost to the breaking point. I knew where her husband was. You think I should have continued washing my hands while she stood suffering in front of my eyes?" The impact of every experience wanes over time. The further in the past an event is, the less powerful will it be the motivation it once imparted. For that reason, the Torah commanded that Hakal be reenacted every 7 years. In this way, the experience of the giving of the Torah at Sinai would not be a vague memory, but an ongoing experience relived from time to time. On this Shabbos, we read about a special Torah portion, Parshas HaChodesh, that speaks about the month of Nisan. Our sages argued when the final redemption with Mashiach will occur. Some said Nisan, our ancestors were redeemed, and so that's when we'll be redeemed. Others say it's going to happen in Tishrei, which is like the Jewish New Year time. There's two reasons Mashiach has to come. One, by virtue of the cumulative service over the last few thousand years. The other is simply because God promised. According to the philosophy of Hasidism, the month of Nisan symbolizes the level of godliness transcending our service, that they were taken out despite that they were spiritually degraded from Egypt. They were unworthy. Tishrei is the time when we return to God by repentance and prayer. The rabbi's disagreement over the most appropriate month was based on which factor is more decisive. Those who believe that spiritual status is more important held it will occur in Tishrei, while those who believe that the Jewish people must be aroused to increase observance would believe it would happen in Nisan because of God's promise. Actual halacha rules that in Nisan they'll be redeemed, which means that God's promise is why. But both sides have a valid point, because the world will have already been transformed by our service into an appropriate vessel, and the revelation will surpass anything that we could have actually done. And another teaching from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. This week we read two portions, Vayakal and Pekudei. Pekudei, we read that both men and women donated, just a moment. We read both men and women donated for the construction of the Mishkan, the traveling sanctuary in the desert. Men and women participated in its construction. It didn't matter if they were rich or poor. It didn't matter what tribe they were from. Each gave according to their ability, and each participated with their talents that God gave them. They were careful to do everything the way God wanted them to the smallest detail. When it was completed, God's presence filled the Mishkan, dwelling amongst them once again. After 210 years of exile in Egypt, 87 of which were fraught with terrible suffering and slavery, it must have been so satisfying and exciting to see the Mishkan, to see God's divine presence fill the Mishkan. What lessons can we learn from this? We're here for a reason, to fashion the entire world into a dwelling place for God. Each one of us is necessary to ensure success. We're all different. We have different means, different talents, and different circumstances, yet we know that we can be successful because we've done it once before. The main thing is that we work together and that we do it right. Small details matter, as in every project, it's not complete until each person does his or her part and until the finishing touches have been completed. How about us, the Jewish people as a whole, and individual Jews? Haven't we done enough? Haven't we suffered enough? Hasn't the time come for all the bad news and anguish to end? Hasidic teachings explain that the level of God's presence that we will experience in the Messianic era will be based on our exile experience and our effort in accomplishing God's will. Perhaps God is holding out for just a bit longer because he wants something more, deeper, that he knows we can attain. Imagine how amazing it will be when Mashiach will come. Nevertheless, we need Mashiach to come already. Until then, we can be there for each other as we proclaim out loud when we finish the week's Torah portion, Chazak Chazak v'nis Chazek, because it finishes Exodus. Be strong, and let us strengthen each other. Finally, the last thing I'll read here is about birthdays. With estimated 385,000 babies born each day around the world, it's likely that anybody could be, even someone listening to me, could be having their birthday today. Conventionally, birthdays are for parties. When we're young and old, we mark the day we're born. It could be cake, ice cream, gifts, games, friends, family celebrating birthday. They could be very secular, once a year. Actually, the only birthday in the Torah is from Paro. Yet, the Talmud teaches one's birthday is the day when one's fortune rises. Is there a special Jewish way to celebrate a birthday? Is there such a thing as a Jewish birthday? Once we find out when our Jewish birthday is, how do we celebrate it? A birthday is a time for reflection, to review the year gone by and think about the aspects of our lives needing improvement and correction. We can use the day to study Jewish thought and share it with others, take extra time to pray, as well as making sure to give charity and do some other special mitzvos. The birthday party is transformed in a joyous gathering of family and friends. The power of the birthday will guarantee that the good resolutions made in the future will be fulfilled in the future. Made in such a setting will be fulfilled in the future. Ancient Jewish sources teach us about the value of celebrating a birthday. For example, they say, cherish the day on which you're born and make a party on that day. After her passing, the Rebbetzin's passing, the Lubavitcher Rebbe chose her birthday as a time to launch a new campaign to reinvigorate the custom of celebrating Jewish birthdays. Even the youngest children should be, he said, taught the special importance of a birthday and encouraged to celebrate friends and increase Jewish observance, resolutions, and we can all rejoice in the knowledge our soul descended for a unique special purpose only ours to fill, and that on the anniversary of our birth, we embark on a new year, set a stage for development, a new chapter in the fulfillment of our life's missions. There's no other you in the world that can accomplish the purpose for which you specifically were born. And if you take advantage of this occasion and be introspective and explore the state of your spiritual life and set your house, your Jewish house more in order, you will start fulfilling some of the good resolutions on the spot. And your birthday will be a time to increase goodness and holiness in the world.